Please introduce yourselves and briefly summarize your education and professional backgrounds.
My name is Brad Pascarella. I work for Matern Professional Engineering. I am the director of the commercial department for Matern. My background is electrical engineering by trade, but I've been a project manager for almost 15 years now, managing all trades.
And my name is Dorian Maness, also at Matern Professional Engineering. I am the senior project manager on the education division, and I am a mechanical engineer by background. I've been a project manager for about 5 years now at Matern.
Can you describe a bit about why Matern, its relationship to the infrastructure industry, perhaps some of their core work and case studies that they're best known for?
So I know core industry. I mean, we work across all sectors um, of engineering from a building design standpoint. When it comes to our involvement with the development of individuals uh, in our industry, we do work hand in hand with internships and such, uh, getting younger individuals into our atmosphere, which Dorian can talk a little bit more about. But we also work well with contractors and partnerships throughout our area on our jobs to make sure that we can introduce some of these younger individuals or people are just getting out involved into the CTE space, helping them through some of those particular knowledgeable and getting them the information that they need to really strengthen their side moving into the industry.
Brad said it really well. I think part of what we like to do at Matern is, n- uh, although we're an engineering firm and, we work hand in hand with a lot of other contractors, architects, a lot of younger professionals, especially, students coming out of college, they really don't understand what engineering is and what that looks like on a day to day. So with a lot of the CTE space becoming more and more popular now for a lot of younger students and even, trade school as well, is kind of getting that experience and showing them what, engineering does look like on a day to day and how it really is like a piece of a large puzzle. And with our internship program that we have with students, a lot of them are seniors in college coming into the engineering field. They get to see what that looks like from an early process, especially being an entry-level engineer and seeing the collaboration that we have with all different disciplines and trades, internally as well as externally. And then, also seeing that getting applied into high schools now, where a lot of high schools are implementing CTE labs on a lot of their campuses and getting that exposure a lot sooner, with like freshmen in high school and understanding what, engineering really looks like.
Okay, just to back up a moment, can you describe a little bit in more specific detail of what a CTE program in space looks like? Like, what exactly are we talking about here?
I can start out on the higher level because I handle most of this higher education portions, which would be Seminole State College or UCF or anything along those matters. It's really building a room or an area that is specific to their trade where they can work out those trades and have an understanding of that trade and what they'll be utilizing in the field. It takes a little bit of extra effort on our side to make sure we are communicating with the individuals that will be running those collaboration labs. Some of them, even at Seminole State, have rooms that all the trades come in and actually build off of their own trades and help um, organize and communicate with each other across the trades to make a successful job. I know down at Dorian's level on the education side, it gets a little more simplified, but you can go in a little bit more, Dorian.
Yeah, so I think a lot of these high schools that are starting to put these CTE labs in their campuses, they really want to focus in on some of the, I guess, more specialty aspects of engineering or construction as well, such as like welding or robotics or even aerospace. So a lot of these CTE spaces that high schools are doing now. They're focusing and choosing a couple of topics that they really want to put equipment in so these students can get hands-on learning and do lab collaborations with other students, whether it's building robots or, welding sheet metal together to create something or, even agriculture and any kind of, I guess, skill or trade skill that they can get the experience in now as opposed to later after they already graduate and don't really know what to do. They'll have some of that exposure and that experience already before they graduate high school.
Okay, so it seems pretty obvious about the transfer of knowledge and skill that firms like Matern are providing to these CTE programs. But does it sound like, is there an actual like physical aspect of this where you're actually helping to design and build the educational spaces?
We help design it. We don't actually build it ourselves. We're just the engineering firm that puts the blueprints together, but we are a very important piece to help facilitate these programs with the user group, making sure that we can provide the proper infrastructure for them to actually succeed in what they want to produce. We also we understand that we need to make it flexible with them as it's a rapid technology is rapidly changing. I know Dorian mentioned welding labs. There are some virtual welding systems now that are being introduced into certain programs and such. But us internally, we are always keeping our minds open to make sure that we communicate with the end user group and what their program wants to be, just to make it successful for that owner.
Now, from doing so many of these now, I think a lot of our clients, on the education side, we have different school districts kind of asking us, hey, we want to do this engineering CTE space. What do you all recommend? Based upon the ones that we've done in the past, making sure that the size of the lab is adequate for the amount of students that they want to have in there and the type of equipment that they want to use and making sure the equipment's properly ventilated and powered. And so it's kind of like we're guiding the different school districts to help create a space that works for their students, but that also gives them, the proper tools and everything that they need.
Okay, so I guess as I'm trying to understand this, could you walk me through perhaps like a case example of Matern's involvement in creating? So I get a school comes, well, I believe they want to start one of these spaces, one of these programs, and they need to help build the space. So they get engineering drawings to give to a contractor for the construction. And then at what point does engineers get back involved in the educational program, or is once the space is kind of designed and then constructed, I guess then what is the role of the engineering firms in that program in that process?
Well, it does depend on each program. We have been asked to come in and help present to the groups. We've done that a couple times whenever that comes about, but it's not a regular basis that we are always asked for that. But we have a turn to definitely have or offered that opportunity whenever it comes about. I do know that our director of engineering, he himself actually taught at Seminole State College under these type of programs. Actually, I think it was called the FEAT program, FEAT, and I'm it's escaping me what that acronym stands for, but he was one of the teachers back in the day. But we would definitely welcome any time whenever a program director wants us to come in and talk what we know about the industry and give our shared experience about it. We are more than welcome to do it. I believe Dorian, you've been involved more on the high school level, I believe.
Yeah, they'll do exactly like what you said. They'll once the school is, constructed and built and their students actually in the program, sometimes they'll ask us to come back and, do a teaching or do a lessons learned or, talk to the students and everything. I think the biggest way that they keep us involved, from my perspective, is that whenever they have a program that they're uh putting into a new school and they want to see how well it goes and they want to get the feedback from the students of how they liked it, things that might not have worked so well or things they want to improve on. And we kind of make sure that we get those things implemented into the next CTE space that we do for that client. So they keep us involved in the design process as well as some of the feedback from the students once it's completed.
And I will add on too. I mean, what we talked about earlier about our internships and such, some of these programs actually have sparked that, and us going out there and talking to the groups have sparked the interest of these individuals that want to reach out to do an internship over the summer or such. So it is like kind of it's a hand in hand program between us and the end users. Just try to improve on the new growing the CTE process and getting them early educated on what our side of the industry is, which hasn't been greatly advertised, you can say, over the last few years, and that's why I'm sure that's why they're spending or investing $10 billion into this workforce education because there was a lapse in between. Oh, everybody needs to go to college, and now there weren't a lot of trade workers. Now we don't have those trade workers, where it's becoming definitely more important with all the older generation starting to retire on the construction side or these hands-on trade skills. So that's why there's a big push in our eyes for this.
Yeah, sure. This is definitely one of the most discussed topics that I get involved with. The shortage of engineers. Now, is this do you guys feel this at your own Matern offices? Is this a major concern for you? Is this part of the reason why you're involved in getting the space, or is it just because this is kind of where the work is at the moment?
No, it's definitely it's something that we see that is what has been a challenge over the last few years. I personally have gone through almost two episodes of this. First was the turn of the economy back in 2008, the shift and the housing crash and everything, when the jobs started dissipating and kids were coming out of school with these degrees, but there was no jobs out there, so they ended up going in a different industry. So we ended up seeing that there was a 4 year gap, um, which I had to honestly traverse through. I went from a junior guy to a more senior guy real quick, just because there was no intermediate there. And then after that, I saw for the next couple of years that there was no necessarily junior guys or middle guys or guys and gals. So it was a huge loss, you can say, between some of those years that we had to right the ship a little or a bit for that. And then just recently with COVID, kind of the same scenario, unfortunately, because there's a lot of like engineering is a lot of hands-on, a lot of direct contact. So we had to adjust ourselves to virtual calls, which is not as simple as everybody had seen or thought it was going to be. There is a lot more information that you can learn from just being there or having a timely pull someone into an office because this is a real life scenario. So with that being said, yeah, I do think this approach for these CTEs to get these individuals understanding of the direction that they're going to go to um, is a very important to us moving forward. We have been struggling finding some um, decent engineers to take over some of our positions here. We luckily are an organization that we don't necessarily hire when we get really busy. We kind of focus on our hiring efforts as what do we need specifically for long term, not necessarily a hire fire scenario. But one, if we can get these individuals, these students, or even higher led trade skills, understanding what we do and getting them into our offices, we believe it will help the industry as a whole, um, especially if other contractors or engineers get involved in the same scenario.
Yeah, I think at least on the education side, a lot of our clients are trying to get ahead of that. And I think that's why they're trying to introduce a lot of these CTE labs and trade skills labs and programs into these high schools super early so that if something were to happen, these students have hands-on experience. They can come out and get those jobs, in the midst if there was another recession or if maybe they just don't college isn't for them and they want to do a trade right after they graduate, they have the opportunity now to do that immediately rather than waiting about 4 or 5 years and finding out, oh, maybe this is what I need to do. So it's been pretty cool to see a lot of the school districts getting behind it and wanting to give opportunities to a lot of their students.
Okay, so as you mentioned, some of these major changes in the field were kind of surprise events that would be difficult to plan for. Philosophically, do you think there is a best way to both prepare for any kind of future, dramatic changes that might make the workforce go up or down, and also when times are steady? What do you think, and this is kind of an opinion question, is the best way to have the workforce developed and ready regardless of what may or may not happen?
Like I said before, in my eyes, like the workforce is lacking right now just because of the less knowledge that they have. I think more knowledge is always good knowledge, even if it's not moving in the direction that you want to go in. At least you understand it right away. As Dorian said, you don't have to go 4 years into something and all of a sudden you realize it's not for you, and now you have to spend another 2 years, 3 years to get that kind of going. So the earlier you start these programs, the better off it is to really, honestly, even safe uh, or protect the possibilities of anything that would happen in the future. Um, I mean, hands-on training and trade skills are not going to go away, in my opinion. I know some manufacturing has moved on to like robots and such, but I don't see a lot of the trades going away. There still needs to be someone there to understand it, even if it did go away. At least the trades itself, and that's where it might shift into, say, understanding how to take care of these things, which you would have to have general knowledge of the item that these say, AI or robots are going into. So that's another stepping stone there. But I think the earlier you understand the process and what you can get into, the better off I think the industry as a whole is going to be.
Yeah, I think it's just the best way to prepare honestly is just exposure. As much exposure as you can get as quickly as you can get it. So having these kids in high school and we're starting to see it in even middle schools now, just have access to some of these programs and to be able to do things that their parents or, adults, in our age working now didn't get the exposure to until later, just gives them more opportunity for when they are done with school to be able to go all these different type of routes. Um, so I think that's like the biggest advantage probably that in my mind I see that they have is just the exposure to getting out there and getting real world experience.
Okay, so now I kind of want to talk about the CTA programs themselves and perhaps maybe some advice you could give since you've been working on these already. So in terms of advice you might give the engineering firms that might be getting involved in these programs, what advice would you give them to be able to do the best job for the students? And also for the students themselves, when they're entering these programs, what should they be thinking about and what they will need to be able to succeed once they've completed these programs?
So, I mean, for other engineering groups, I would say really they need to break out of their bubble. Engineers aren't the most social sometimes. It's just the nature of the beast sometimes. But gravitating to these kids and reaching out to these programs is really the start of it. Having, I mean, even having different groups come in so they can learn, having an internship program or a co-op program, get these students out in the fields so they can understand things. From a student side, I mean, don't limit yourself to what you see. There is there needs to be some self discipline in trying to understand the industry also and asking the questions. Again, we've come into a kind of an introvert area, you can say, or era, you can say, that needs to be broken, in my opinion, where a lot of discussions just need to be there. The Again, it's a lot of just self-help from the student side of asking questions, asking questions, asking questions, going out and finding some mentorships, um, reaching out, making sure they have the proper uh, fundamental equipment, and they can really work to their advantage for these or within these programs themselves. And don't be afraid of, the students shouldn't be afraid of saying, hey, this is not necessarily for me, but once you find that it's not necessarily for you, speak up. I mean, it's the whole reasoning for these early CT programs to understand what you might want to get into. And the earlier you find that out, the faster you can move in the right direction. Um, a personal story of mine was I went to UCF under electrical engineering, and they didn't even teach me anything that is what I do now. They taught me electronics and stuff like that. And I was kind of lost myself of where I would be going. And luckily for myself, I actually joined a co-op program that put me with an architectural engineering company. So if I would have known this a long time ago, I could have probably streamlined myself into this industry because I really enjoyed this industry. I wasn't enjoying the microelectronics industry. So again, it's kind of a personal experience that I wish I had the CDE programs, so I can see what it gets involved with. Um, I honestly thought architects did everything that we did back back before even in college before I graduated. I thought architects did everything we did. So um, so that's just my personal opinion.
I agree. Same, I mean, same here. I didn't really understand our industry and how engineers play a big part into it. I thought it was all architects because that's really all you hear about. Um, but I think for students, the the biggest thing is to really focus on their communication and collaboration. Going through engineering school, yeah, you get that introvert kind of, nerdy stigma because everything's just tests, a lot of equations, a lot of tests. So it seems like it's a lot of individual work, but when you come out into the real world, like what I found out is that it's all collaboration, it's all communication, it's how you talk to people, getting to know the right people to talk to, being able to communicate your ideas to someone else, whether they're in your own office or they're, in another office or another firm that you're collaborating with on a project. So I'd say, yeah, having the social skills and the proper work etiquette for young kids coming out is going to be huge, because they're going to be working with adults who've been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years. So I think that's really important for students. And then yeah, for the firms who are working on these programs and wanting to get students involved, I think it's just making sure that they have the opportunities, like Brad said, and starting out getting internship programs, getting students, who are interested in these kind of fields and kind of showing them the everyday, work life that this job really entails so they can kind of make those decisions about, how they want to progress into the future, or maybe do something different if it's not for them, but just so that they have the exposure to what it really looks like.
Okay, it seems that the other important relationship is the one between the engineers, the students, and those running the schools and these programs that are going to be doing that. How do you foster the best relationship with those who are wanting these CTE programs, who are developing them, and in effect teaching them? I'm sure with engineering help, but what's the best way to keep those relationships on track for the best end results for the students?
I think it's just mainly communication and getting out there. Not being shy of asking the questions. I mean, again, it's really about it's a group effort, not just like the engineer's way. It has to be a program developed holistically. Um, and again, so it can be that, hey, understanding there's two kind of a couple directions you can go. At least in our industry, you can become, I mean, you can become a trades worker, you can become an engineer, you can become a contractor, or general contract construction manager, at least at my level, for these CTE programs. And just having that understanding that you can catch that early, um, and staying working with the different schools or school systems and helping them through what the newer technologies are for each of the trades. I think that it's just a relationship building thing that just keeps carrying forward through each entity.
Yeah, and I think another thing too with working with our clients is just being flexible. A lot of times, these programs and these labs, they're not cheap. They're pretty expensive, especially with all the equipment that they have to put in there. And a lot of the hardest part of our job is always to make sure that we stay within budget for what the client wants. So I think being flexible and and all of these spaces don't have to look exactly the same. We've had some spaces that are really it's a split classroom slash lab, and they have like a removable panel, and they're able to transform the classroom into a lab when they need it, or other times they can have desk space. So I think it's just really understanding what the client, the school districts want to do, maybe trying to, work and exactly the type of equipment that they want, what they can actually afford, and then maybe depending on the amount of students that they have in these programs, how big they want the program to be, making spaces that work for the school district. And that might look different across four different schools, all trying to accomplish the same thing. But at the end of the day, as long as it works for everyone and everyone's happy, then I think, the client's satisfied and they want to continue to use us. So I think that's the biggest part.
I'd imagine that another challenge would be just keeping up with the rapid pace of technology change and development. I would think that by the time, you've got one designed and built, the technology's changed so much that you're gonna have to keep updating that. How much of a problem is that? And what are some of the ways to keep up with those changes?
Also, I mean, technology does change. It's not as strong on our side with AutoCAD changing into like BIM, which is building information modeling, and Revit. That's been a slow kind of go, and we don't see anything really changing past that, except for maybe getting into a 3D, um, more of a 3D environment than we use it currently. We just don't have a lot of clients that actually want to pay for our services for that much work. Um, but I think I have seen certain architects and contractors utilize those or have like these 3D rooms where you can walk in and go through. But yes, it is a learning curve when things change. The code cycles do change too, which I mean, Dorian can talk about the new refrigerants codes, but which actually has been causing somewhat of a true problem to us. But that's why we have to keep everything flexible for these spaces to where they can come in and just change things up as is needed. Um, like I said, code cycles don't change all that often. The biggest one that's coming up is the refrigerant, which is it's a higher flammable refrigerant, which is causing a little bit of headaches when we're looking at designing or trying to move forward with the areas that we have already designed. Um, it's just, again, trying to make these rooms as flexible as possible, trying to meet the standards that we see now or we are aware of coming up. There are a lot of individuals in our office are part of of these groups like ASHRAE um, and IEEE that are helping develop these new standards. And just being aware of what's out there moving forward has helped us and the clients trying to future proof anything that might be changing.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just communication and staying up to date, but also, when code updates affect our design and we're, designing a CTE lab or a space or anything really for a client, it's, having the meetings and the communication with them to let them know how the change is going to affect us and if there's a way that we can, you know, maybe design something a little bit different that enables us to design it to what they want, but also stays within the new code itself. So I think the communication's huge, and then a lot of development meetings with the clients and keeping them involved throughout the process from beginning to end, not just telling them, hey, this is what we're going to do. And then 5 or 6 months later, it's, all right, the design is done. We keep them involved. We attend lots of meetings, design review meetings with them as well. So they stay in the loop as things change. They kind of know about it and we can plan for those things.
And I think another thing to mention too is whenever we are meeting with these individuals, sometimes we know there's a code change coming up and they weren't even aware of it. So they actually go have an aha moment and actually go, okay, we need to start looking into this and developing the criteria, which then in turn talks to us a little bit more to understand what's coming up. So that's
Right.
another part of our involvement with these clients or with the clients about wanting to feel that and how the turn's been assisting with that.
How about adopting other forms of engineering, such as like civil engineering and structural engineering? Can these CTEs, also develop engineers in those fields with the same, I guess infrastructure of their own programs and buildings, or are they a little more differentiated than that?
I mean, I know there definitely could form those. I know they're not as I like structurally, it's more welding stuff as you can see. Civil is a lot of hands-on and out on site. I know colleges have focused more on that. Same thing with structural, rather than I believe down at the high school level. But Dorian, you can talk about the high school level, or the younger level.
Yeah, so far we've definitely seen a lot of robotics, aviation, stuff like that. But I think you definitely could do it for civil, for anything really. I think it's kind of a cool challenge, to see what kind of equipment they would want or what they would want that program to look like. I definitely think you could design a space for it, even if it's, an all exterior space for civil, and because most of the time they're doing surveys or walking around a site. So yeah, I think it's definitely possible. It'd be really cool to see kind of how it turns into. I mean, I've already in the past about 5 to 8 years, I've seen it's really just been robotics labs, and that was kind of the start of what I saw what it was. And now they do everything from robotics to welding to building airplane parts to I think veterinarian labs, like veterinarian CTE programs to uh art to almost anything. So it's pretty cool seeing the different programs pop up. But yeah, I think it's definitely possible. I think it would just take a lot of collaboration with the owner to understand what that program really looks like and what they would want.